All right, let's talk about cylinders. So cylinders, as a lot of you guys are familiar with, is a geometric voluminous form that has two ellipses that are flat planes on either side of a round body. So in general, you've got something that looks like this, just roughly speaking, for a cylinder, right? We're all familiar with this. So again, we have this volumetric form. It is round down the shaft of the body, and we have flat planes that are ellipses or circles, if you're looking at it straight on, that are on the top and the bottom. So that if you were to see a cylinder that was opaque, you would have, and if you're looking above it, you'd see this top plane, and then the bottom would be curved because we're seeing, that was not straight, because we're seeing that bottom part of the ellipse, right? So two ellipses, and we have straight lines. This would be a vertical ellipse. Certainly you can do something that is horizontal as well. Okay, so the concept of a cylinder is very simple, and we're pretty much familiar with it since cylinder is a word that you see used for many different reasons, for many different applications. I won't worry about erasing that. Okay, so let's think about this in terms of perspective. With perspective, you always have a horizon line, and when it comes to having even like 1 point perspective or something like that, remember you can encompass anything into a box. So when it comes to drawing a cylinder in perspective, you can think of the ellipse as at the top or the bottom as being encompassed by a box. So if I wanted to draw this ellipse, and let's just say 1 point perspective, I've got my horizon line, I've got my one vanishing point. You're going to start with a box. Now, because I'm going to draw a cylinder, I'm going to think of this box as being more tall than he is wide, so that I can match something that looks kind of like that. So I'm going to draw this super fast here only because we need to apply what this is. Okay, so I've got that. And I'm going to try to square that off as much as evenly as possible. So we've got our box. And I'm going to draw this box as if it is see-through so that we can see this bottom plane and this top plane. So as you can see, if we're putting a cylinder in here, the ellipse, let's find our midpoint, about right there, right? And so you'd have your cylinder ellipse be like this right there. Okay, so it would be encompassed in here. Notice that this bottom one, not perfect, but there you go. Notice that because of the perspective, this ellipse is thinner. We're seeing less surface area of it. This ellipse is a little bit more open visually. Okay, so remember then we're getting something that looks more like this. So if I were to highlight this, I don't know if that's working as well as I would have hoped, but we have our opaque cylinder right here. Noticing that when you have an ellipse closer to the horizon line, it visually is thinner. We're seeing less of it visually. The lower down we go from our eye level, we're looking more down on this guy. So we're going to see more of that open ellipse at the bottom. The same would be just reversed if the ellipse were up above the horizon line. We would see the closer the ellipse is to the horizon line, it would be thinner. The further away, we're starting to get something that's a little bit more open. Okay, so we understand ellipses. We understand that that's how they are in perspective. Now to draw something with an applied cylinder, remember having the ellipses, what I'm going to demonstrate is just having equal ellipses on the top and the bottom. I'm not going to worry about having both of them be in perspective where whichever one is closest to the horizon line would be thinner, whichever one is further away would be larger, like how I've demonstrated here. But this is good knowledge to understand that when you have a particular viewpoint in your perspective, whatever is closest to the horizon line, this is the same as a cube, by the way. When you draw your cubes in 1 or 2 point perspective, the closer you are to the horizon line, the less amount of space we're going to see on that plane. If it's like the top plane, we're going to see more amounts of space visually as the whatever that shape is, that plane or that ellipse gets further away from the horizon line. But moving on to just an applied cylinder, I'm going to have my top and my bottom ellipses just be the same, similar to what I was drawing up here. Okay, so new sheet of paper. Here we go. Let's demonstrate this as a scroll, okay? So if we're gonna draw a scroll, you need at least 2 cylinders, okay? So remember, I was talking about cylinders in perspective and what that means with how much surface area you're seeing of the 2 ellipses, the top and the bottom one. But for this, for just your basic scroll that still has depth to it, but we're not gonna apply a specific point perspective to it. Therefore, I'm going to just have the top and my bottom ellipse be the same. So my top ellipse, my bottom ellipse. Something that can help is to draw one ellipse and then just draw your straight lines, and that gives you the width for your bottom ellipse. I think in the lecture we established what our height is and then what the width is. So the height, let's just say the height is this, and let's say my width is going to be this. Establish the height first, because then that just gives you how tall do you want your cylinder. Establish the height of that top ellipse. And then my recommendation is just take your straight edge and just make sure that it's even. So this is going to be my major axis. All ellipses have 2 axes. Is that how you say that? The major axis is the long one, okay, establishing the width. The minor axis is the one, that's how we label the thinner edges there of the ellipse, okay? So what is smaller is the minor one. It gets smaller the more that ellipse gets closer to our eye level. So if we see a cylinder where the top is perfectly aligned with our eye level, we wouldn't even see any ellipse. It would seem like it's a straight line. So the closer that top ellipse gets to the horizon line or our eye level, the thinner it gets, and that thin amount is what is being designated by what we call the minor axis. And you would have a right angle. They are perpendicular to each other. So that's what we're establishing here with this skeleton. I've got my height of my entire cylinder. I've got my width of this top guy, this top ellipse, and that width right there just establishes my major axis, okay? Same down here, I kept these widths even, okay? So you can even put a little bar down there. Kind of looks like weights or something, a little dumbbell. Takes some getting used to drawing ellipses with your hand-eye coordination. Okay, so generally about the same. And then you would just connect them with a straight line end to end, right? So we've got our ellipse that I will darken. Okay, and so we now have our cylinder. Again, super easy. We're just going over all of the specifics of how you would draw a consistent cylinder, because now we're drawing our scroll. I mentioned that before. All right, so let's draw our scroll. I'm gonna draw 2 kinds of scrolls. I'm gonna have the height of both to be the same, which you should when you're drawing a scroll. It is 1 sheet of long parchment paper that has been rolled on either end over the volumetric form of a cylinder, and that's why we're making scrolls, is because cylinders are an inherent part of scrolls. So I've got my height, which is the same, because the sheet of paper is the same, like, you know, size across the whole scroll. Okay, so that is generally the same. I'm gonna keep that the same here as well. It's not absolutely perfect, but I'm eyeballing it to keep it the same amount of space. There we go, that looks good. Taking my time now to draw my ellipse. That's a poor ellipse. Okay. That's a little bit better. Okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and draw my ellipses here. There we go. I'm gonna finish out my cylinders. You'll notice These are not even. This is what happens when you're making a video late at night. Okay, straight lines, there we go. A little bit better. All right, so 2 cylinders that are about the same size next to each other with some space in between, okay? So remember, I established my height, I established my width. I'm keeping the heights even across both, keeping the widths the same. That's just giving me the skeletal basis for the major and the minor axis of the ellipses on the upper and bottom planal sides of the cylinder. So this is my first scroll. What you can do then is you can take this bottom curve right here. And what we're doing is we're doing one big S curve. It's kind of like this is an S and then it goes into another S. Okay, so I'm connecting those bottom ones of both with a curve just like that. We're doing the same thing. We're doing the exact same S curve here on the bottom. Just like that. Connecting bottoms, the bottom ellipses correlate. All right, there we go. Pretty easy. But now what's happening, the reason why we needed the ellipse is this now wraps around in space. Wrap it around the ellipse that you drew up here on the cylinder. Stop it wherever you want to. And then with a straight vertical line down. Same on the other side. This is what stops that parchment paper. Doot, 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 doot. We would see this. We would not see any of that because this scroll is opaque. So what I can do then is I can erase my extra guidelines. Doot, 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 doot. And I will attempt with that pink highlighter to make this bold as well, although you could probably see it fine how I have it. Wee. Boop, boop. Straight lines, right? Here we go. There we go, just like that. And so you could argue that these would be in shadow because they are the plane that is hooking back around. Now think about this. This would take it to the next level. Just think about it logically. If this is a cylinder, which it is, this right here, you could argue is kind of the back end of another like invisible cylinder we haven't drawn. So as we're considering maybe how we would do some contour lines of shading, we're wrapping around. This is wrapping this way, right? And then this is wrapping around that way, okay? So you can be thinking through with the volumetric form, how would the contour lines be wrapping around something like this? And you can use some of that cross-hatching for shading if you wanted to. Okay, next scroll. This is one that's gonna be faster. Heights. Widths. Widths. Keeping it somewhat the same. Remember, we're just making stuff even. Do the best you can. We're not using stencils. We're practicing our hand-eye coordination with making ellipses for our cylinders. Use your straight edge. Oh, wow. Okay, obviously not perfect. What you guys need to do is use your straight edge and have them align corner to corner. I'm rushing, so this video isn't super long. All right, so think about another scroll with me, this kind of a scroll, where you would wrap around the bottom, right? Just like we did before. And then underneath the bottom, we're now crossing. Woo. It's like one big S hook. We're crossing from the bottom of this one to the top visually, the top of this one, hooking around like that, right? Woo. There we go. Looks like one big S, just like that. Same thing down here. Now, we would not see this. It would wrap around this side. Okay, but we're doing the exact same thing. Wrap around here, okay? But this is what would be happening here. This would wrap around the back and it would stop to align with that guy, Okay, so you'd be straight down. We would see this. You can start seeing this in 3 dimensions. This is going to make a lot of sense to you. I'm going to use my knead eraser to erase that, just the guidelines that we would not see in reality. Okay, so this one went behind, this one is not going in front. We are seeing this. This we would not see. These guidelines we would not see. Okay, starting to visualize this banner right here, this scroll. Here we go. Doop. And this stops. Now remember that we wouldn't see that. That's behind it. We do see this, the end here, because it's coming forward at us. Remember, this is the perception of space. And space is overlapping. Space is what is in front of something else. What is further away? There's depth, there's space. So this guy is in front of this guy, which is in front of this guy. So he is in shadow, he's behind. This guy, you could argue like that little corner is in shadow. And then as we, come out into the light, it gets less in shadow, okay? Again, we have our contour lines. If we wanted to think about how this is wrapping around in space, and then this as well wrapping around like that. So we've got 2 different scrolls using cylinders. One is where you have it wrapped on either end the same way, and you just have this little wave in there. It looks like this nice little scroll. And this one is like what maybe you would see normally as a typical scroll, where you have it wrapped one direction on one, I don't know what those are called. It's like a rolling pin type thing. The bar that the scroll would wrap around. So you've got it wrapped on one direction on the one end, and then the other direction on the other end. Remember, we're doing these horizontal, so it kind of looks like a banner, but an actual scroll that like someone would maybe roll out. But you do the exact same thing, it's just vertical. You're doing it vertically instead of horizontally, so we have this nice little thing, Hear ye, ta-da, with a little signature from the king. Woo, just like that. All right. So we've got our cylinders, understanding ellipses and perspective, understanding ellipses just being equal to just give a general sense of depth, to apply them to something like scrolls or banners.